the very moment that he got into varsity, he began to get to a platform, to have a platform whereby he could express his discomfort, express his dismay over the system, the system that he had grown up in, which was very much segregatory, the system that he was now exposed to, that was supposed to train him to be a medical doctor, but was very much militantly against his brilliance, against his success. That would mean that he had to invest more for him to be successful compared to his white counterparts that he was studying with. So this, in its own, shaped, the philosophy that we find up him having and him propagating, him pushing later on in his early life.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. That is very important. We're trying to understand the story of a man who, of course, look at the society, see all the injustice, see all the things that were being done to his people and to him that he didn't like, and he decided to take action. I think that is what every man needs to do. If there is something you don't like, you need to act. You cannot keep quiet, because by keeping quiet, indeed, you are on the part of the oppressor. Any person in the world is supposed to do this, wherever you are. If there is a system that is unjust, you cannot keep quiet in it. So that is already a frame of mind now we are beginning to understand. But at what point did Steve Biko actually started his activism that we can say, okay, he's an activist? Apart from all the things that he has seen from his childhood, now he has gone to school, now he understands the system. At what point did he actually become a full-scale activist?
In 1966, he joined the University of Natal, where he had been enrolled to study medicine. So he wanted to be a medical doctor. At that particular point in time, he then joined the National Union of South African Students, NUSAS, which was composed of Black Native African students as well as white liberal students. White liberal students, these were white students who were very much against the apartheid movement. And then we had the Black Native students who were also against the apartheid government. But he began to be part of that system. He joined that students' union, and the student union had a certain philosophy that it followed and that it pursued. But you find that it's at that very moment it becomes pertinent for me to quote one of the very famous quotes by Steve Biko himself, where he said, "The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed." In other words, Steve Biko understood that it is not a physical battle that he was fighting when he joined the student union, the student movement, or the student activism that he began to be part of. He understood that this started in the mindset, the consciousness, the ideology, because the ideology is the one that shapes the activism. The ideology is the one that shapes the political frame of one's political path. The ideology is the one that shapes the activities, shapes the path, shapes the agenda. So he understood that for him having had the privilege, at least to be in a tertiary, a higher tertiary institution, he was more privileged to make sure that he takes part, he pushes for the emancipation of his fellow Black Africans who were oppressed. That is beginning from the mindset itself, from the ideology itself. So 1966 was more of the turning point, because I think at that particular moment, he began to fully experience, actively experience, practically experience the segregation, the racism, and the apartheid that was systemized, institutionalized, both in government, both in business, both in industry, and also in the educational system that was meant to undereducate the native, whilst upholding and pushing and making sure that it sustains white privilege, the dominance of the white minority over the majority black natives who were, by the way, the stakeholders and the stockholders of their land by virtue of being the owners of the land itself. So 1966 became part of it, and then you find that the NUSAS that he was part of was very much interesting, because you later on see that Steve Biko had to move out, to resign from NUSAS and then go and form what was named SASO, that is the South African Students Organization, by virtue of him saying, he realized that there were white liberals. The white liberals who were in NUSAS were fighting against a system that was oppressive in nature, but their fight was not his fight. There was this ideological dissonance that was, that was there, because the white liberals were fighting for the co-option of the black natives into an oppressive, illegal, and unequal system. He was fighting for the total emancipation of the black natives from the white dominance. So you find that the white liberals were part of NUSAS, in as much as they were fighting the apartheid system, they also wanted to domineer the agenda of the black natives. So he was against the dominance of the white people by the black natives in essence, even though they had a common goal. He was saying, we are not fighting for co-option. We are not fighting for a space in an oppressive system, but we are fighting for the restoration of the dignity of the African person, the respect of the rights of the African native. We are fighting for the native to be empowered, to be freed totally, that is economically, financially, politically, and in terms of ownership of the means of production. He was fighting for the redistribution of the land back to the owners of the land itself. So Steve Biko is an interesting character who really did much of the groundwork. Later on, Nelson Mandela himself says Steve Biko is the one who lit the spark that caused a felt fire across South Africa in terms of the political consciousness, of the black consciousness, and the political realization by the natives that we need to confront the system. Because you find that by the time Steve Biko gets onto the student activist platform, the natives were very much scared to be part of the political discourse of the time because of the deterrent nature of the settler oppressive white apartheid regime. They were very brutal in nature, very brutal in their approach, and very much segregatory in their approach in everything that they did. They were brutal against the natives, cruel, so to speak, evil, callous. So this is the legacy that we find having been set up, having been left by Europeans who came to colonize Africa. They were brutal, evil, and callous, and yet they claim to be the proponents and the propagators of human rights, when in effect they suspended the rights of the black natives during the times of Steve Biko. And we have the likes of Steve Biko, who had to stand as students primarily, and later on as national activists on the South African national scale, to fight that oppressive system, that white dominance, and to make sure that the black natives themselves have that black pride. They are accorded and respected and viewed as fellow human beings, because they have these inalienable rights that are God-given, that by virtue of them being humans, they have their rights which must be respected by whomsoever, whoever, and whenever and wherever.
I want you to help me clarify one thing here. Both in the case of Nelson Mandela in the ANC movement, called the ARM movement at the time, and also in the case of Steve Biko, because many people, particularly in the West, would tag them as terrorists, as if they just wanted to destroy white people in South Africa. But nobody ever make any attempt to understand that they are fighting unjust system. They are fighting injustice. and that perhaps what they wanted is not to kill the white people, even though they have every reason to do that, but they needed a just society, society where everybody was going to be treated equally. I want you to expand a bit on that, please.
Yeah, indeed, it's in the context of Steve Biko himself. You know that he had white friends. Steve Biko had a lot of white friends, and he was very much against the anti-white hatred. He was very much against that. He was not against white people as they are, as human beings, but he was against whiteness. He was against the propagation of whiteness, white superiority. You would also need to understand that the colonialists came up, set up systems, branded nationalists. Steve Biko was one such a nationalist. He was a socialist. They were branded as terrorists, as you allude to, by virtue of them calling for a simple thing for white fellow humans to accord and respect and view them as fellow human beings. I don't think that was too much to ask for. And for one to then brand one who's asking for equal treatment as a terrorist smacks of white hypocrisy. We find that being propagated everywhere.